Have you ever gone after a dream most people would never even try? That was me. I'm Caroline Gardner, a single mom of 3 who thought I could never accomplish something like a triathlon until I did, and everything changed. This is a show about people who dare to go after their dreams, especially when met with life's adversities. So let's go find out why we try. Hey guys, it's Caroline. Welcome back to the show. Today's episode is previously recorded back in March. I had a wonderful opportunity thanks to Coach Noah Lamb up Long Island of the Lightning Warriors. He's the coach of Lightning Warriors. He put me in touch with quite a few people, actually. Thank you, Noah and Leah Jansen. Thank you guys. Both you've connected me with some incredible individuals in the world of triathlon. And this particular person who is coming on and having a conversation with me that you'll hear shortly, he holds a very important role in the triathlon community. And that's because he's the chief executive officer for USA Triathlon, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic national governing body for the sport of triathlon. Rocky Harris. Guys, when I saw that Noah Lamb had introduced us via email, I really did not anticipate getting a yes, a green light. Again, I really anticipated somebody from their camp coming on and saying, hey, we'll talk with you. But Rocky Harris himself said yes, as you'll hear in this conversation. And I hope you leave some notes for Rocky in your reviews. I hope you take a minute and write it down because he reads these and everybody reads these. We want to know if you're enjoying these conversations. In this conversation, we get personal with him. And I'm really appreciative of him saying yes, because my goal in this whole production is to humanize this incredible sport and all endurance sports. We are all human beings signing up for these amazing journeys, really is what they are. These goals that we have that we want to accomplish. And along the way, we meet some really incredible individuals who inspire us, who frustrate us. Some people we meet along the way in life, they frustrate us. They drive us. They motivate us. They pick us up. They help us understand ourselves a little bit better and the world in which we live. So kick back with your favorite beverage and enjoy my conversation with Rocky Harris, the CEO of USA Triathlon. All right, good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Why We Try podcast. I'm your host, Caroline, and today a very special guest, Rocky Harris, the CEO of USA Triathlon. Welcome to the Why We Try podcast. How are you this morning?
Hey, Caroline. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
It's awesome to have you here. And I have a quick question for you. Did you bring your favorite beverage?
I did. I have my coffee here, and I wish it was from a local coffee shop.
There you go.
A big brand coffee shop. I'm normally a local coffee guy. So,
I agree.
Yeah. But I do a few of these a day. One right when I wake up. It's like my alone time. So I got 3 little kiddos like you do. That alone time while it's still quiet in the house, have my coffee, read a little bit, and then I usually do at least one more after my workout or mid-morning like now.
Awesome. I agree. Lately, I've been making it actually all through quarantine, was making it a point to wake up early. Nobody's awake, peace and quiet. And the only problem is I do have a coffee maker that grinds the coffee. So I get a little nervous because I don't want anybody to wake up, but it's such a ritual. So let's take a sip. I too brought coffee this morning. Cheers to you.
Cheers to you. Yeah.
And
it's funny though how that alone time matters so much more now with the pandemic than it ever has, because most of us are working from home and hadn't in the past, with our kids around, not going to school, and just a lot of people around you at all times without it being just alone for a little while. Yeah. So I find that like what most people value right now is just a few minutes of just peace and just to think on their own. And so it's while many people are isolated alone, those of us with families are like just overwhelmed with that always being on. And so it's interesting you said that you've woken up earlier because of that, but that's always been I like having that few minutes in the morning just to be able to think and relax.
It's so important. And I'm glad that you brought that up and saying that, because my sister, who is up in Connecticut, I'm originally from Connecticut, she was stating to me that through the pandemic, she found that she was working so much more than she was when she would go into the office. And it was just because she couldn't turn it off. Like she was like, oh, I can finish this and I can finish this. And she needed to also step away and have like timers and settle down and get to that peace, because if we don't carve it out, and we know that from being in the world of triathlon, like if we don't carve out the time, we'll see it on the other side. Like we'll feel it and we'll know when it comes to an opportunity to do a race. But before we go get in any further of triathlon, I want to know a little bit more about you and your triathlon beginning. So share with us your introduction to triathlon.
Yeah, so before we had kids, my wife and I went to Belize for a vacation. I was actually, as you were talking, I think that at that time in my career, I was probably in my late 20s or maybe early 30s. I didn't know how to turn it off and compartmentalize my life. I was very much like working all the time. Obviously, I had my wife, who we spent all of our time together, but I really was like just blending everything. I was finding that I wasn't being great at anything because I was just kind of like doing work all the time and trying to like do life and work together. And I went to Belize to get my first vacation that I had in a long time. And I ended up getting bit by a bug when I was there, like literally a bug, and getting an infectious disease that made it so for about a year, I wasn't able to be physical anymore, like work out. I couldn't even have a beer, which was frustrating for me.
That's very
Just
frustrating.
Yeah, exactly. It really impacted me in a big way. And I was somebody who's physically fit. I love just working out a lot. I grew up, my dad was a coach, so I grew up in that lifestyle. And so when I started feeling better, as I was getting treatments and different things, I said, I want to do something. I want to have a big goal to come back. And I'd done cycling events like the MS 150 long distance kind of events before, and really liked endurance sport, ran track in high school and just really liked it. So I was like, okay, challenges like endurance sports, and triathlon came up. And so I was like, oh yeah, I've always thought about doing a triathlon. I always thought I was a good swimmer. My dad was a college swimmer, and my grandfather on my mom's side was a college swimmer. So I should have been a good swimmer, but I'm not that great of a swimmer actually. And so I decided at that point, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to come back from this and do a triathlon. I started training at the local YMCA, like in the swimming pool. I was already a good cyclist. And I just did a sprint triathlon down in the Gulf of Mexico. And so I didn't know anything. I didn't know what to do. This is why I have an affinity towards USA Triathlon, actually. As I was like Googling, I was like, it was like anything. If you have a cough, you could either have like cancer or like just a cough, right? There was like the full gamut of everything. And so at the time, USA Triathlon had all these resources that I jumped on, like what to bring to transition, like how to prepare for your first triathlon. So I was like just absorbing everything I could. And I get there, and it's early morning, it's in the Gulf of Mexico, and it's pouring rain and it's dark. So the race started really early. So it's pitch black, raining, and I have to jump in the middle of the ocean, like the Gulf of
Yeah,
Mexico.
sweet. That's exactly
Yeah,
what
so
we want to do when we're
my
nervous about
first one,
swimming.
right? Yeah, and so I ended up doing it, and I remember I was like getting ready to cross the finish line, and I had this overwhelming like emotion overcome me of like, oh my God. And it was like, it was more than just the sport. It was like not just a triathlon thing. It was like I attached my life problems to like me overcoming that to me finishing this race, because it gave me something to focus on that wasn't this debilitating disease. It gave me something to focus on that was like about growth and progress versus just trying to like hang on every day. And so it gave me this feeling that I hadn't had since I was younger, and I competed and won big games or had a game winning, touchdown or whatever it was. It gave me that feeling back again, but actually in a deeper way, because at the time when I was young, I didn't know I didn't attach it to my life. It was just kind of this thing I did.
Yeah, it was
And so that got me involved with triathlon, and that got me really to continue to do it since then.
wow.
So that's my intro to triathlon
I
story.
love it. And
Obviously,
thanks for
I've had
sharing
a lot.
that. And thanks for opening up about it, because I think that's, for me, it's definitely important. And that's one of the reasons why I started the show, is because I was going down and saying why. The whys were coming in, and I had lost my mom in 2018, and it was a very sudden passing. And I needed to find my why again. Like I needed to know what, she wasn't going to be at these races. What was my why? There was just a deeper search and the connections that I made with the people that are on our local tri club team, the Miami Tri Club. Shout out to my coach, Andy, because he's just amazing, and everybody on the team. It served it, they and that group served its purpose again as being hit during a quarantine. So one of the interviews that I really love that you did with Bob Babbitt, which he's amazing, you talked a little bit about how your mom recently did a triathlon, a virtual triathlon. And I wanted to ask you, how did that feel for you? Because that must have been such a wonderful moment for her to be able to say, hey, guess what? I did a triathlon. Like, that's awesome. And share with us a little bit about how this evolving world of electronics is also in a silver lining kind of moment of the craziness of the pandemic. What did that mean for you? And what did that explain to you? And share it with us.
Yeah. So I think probably like your mom was, my mom's my biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
She's the one that I call when something good happens. And so she knew how important the sport has been to me in my development as an adult and now professionally as well. And she just wanted to be supportive to show that anybody could do it. And she, as a cancer survivor, she had to get both of her knees replaced. So she's not exactly like the typical triathlete, but she wanted to show that anyone could do it, that even she could do it. And so that's what I think when she did it, it was just another sign of how our sport is way more accessible and open than many give us credit for. And I think part of that is just our fault in the way that we talk about the sport, because even I've seen it with myself as I gone and grown through the sport. Is at first, as I was going through, it's just about doing a race. And then it started being about doing better in a race. And then it was like, okay, I need to do longer races. And then there's this weird thing where like every time I had to go a little longer, a little faster. And it can be a vicious cycle. So what I found over the last 4 or 5 years is the most of our sport is not that. It's mostly people who had my initial experience, fell in love with it, and just love doing local triathlons around the country or in their backyard. And that's really what I think when it comes to technology, the virtual events, it opened up access to everybody who had the fear of going and doing a race because of all the uncertainty. It is very complicated. Unless you have a triathlon, a multi-sport community like you did, it's hard to know what to do. And many people are just so nervous about doing something with that uncertainty. But I think when it comes to people like my mom's story or others, which we've just heard so many great stories I have since joining USA Triathlon 3.5 years ago about the accessibility in our sport, the way that people, when they come in, they're really welcomed. It's like really inclusive once you're in the sport. But we have to do a better job of opening up and removing those barriers, those mental barriers for people and virtual events are a great way to do it. It's a good way for people to say, I did a triathlon, and then that opens up their comfort level for doing one in person. Because our goal is to get as many people active in America as possible. And so virtual events, if it makes you be a little more active, we did our job and we're happy with it.
I agree. That's something that also we talked about that in the beginning, like during a pandemic, and how do you get that space? Where do you find that space, especially if you might be stuck inside? There's something that you can do indoors, or there's something that you go to an area that's open, and going back to certain basics, right? Like your paths. I know that for me, one thing that I tapped into is gravel riding here in Miami. Oh my gosh, there's so many paths. And I just felt like, how have I been living here for 17 years and not seen this beautiful, wide open spaces? So that kind of gave an opportunity. And then with having certain local, like you're saying, local bike shops, here's a path, like just offering that there was a path. And then eventually in Claremont, there were some local races that were opened up, thankfully, and they were doing things in such with proper procedures in place. And it felt good, and it felt like fun. It removed so much of that stress and anxiety as we're going out here. Majority of us on the non-pro side are out here for fun. So, and activity. So one of the questions that I wanted to ask you was also about your Power Within and Together We Thrive initiatives. That's something that is very near and dear to my heart as well. And I'd like to hear a little bit more about this.
Yeah, so what we realized, or I did almost immediately after joining USA Triathlon, is that the brand of our sport, what it means, the perception of our sport It really become too singular and too focused on just long distance, just being, again, that tip of the sphere, the people who can get on the podium. But it's mostly about like 10-hour races. And what people
Yeah.
thought when I was talking to people as I got the job that had nothing, know nothing, very little about triathlon. I can't believe you do those 10, 12, 15-hour races. And I'm like, no, triathlon's so much more than that. There's pool triathlons, there's there's sprint distance, super sprints. There's something for everyone. It's not all about the long distance races. So what I found was that Ironman is credited with really growing our sport across America and the world, and the brand, that brand that they established, the Ironman brand, which is so strong, became synonymous with triathlon, and so much so that in some ways it took over the name triathlon. So when people thought triathlon, they thought Ironman.
Yeah.
And so Power Within is about telling individual stories like what you're doing, right? What you enjoy doing, what your passion is.
Yeah.
It's telling stories of these individuals who have used triathlon to benefit their lives, whether it's to overcome something, whether there's just so many different layers to our sport. And what was being exposed publicly was one piece of it, a very important piece, which is long distance, highly competitive. But that's just one part of our sport, and a very small part actually compared to the rest of the sport. So Power Within is really a way for us to show like how the power of our sport and how you have to reach within, and each individual has a different story attached to that. So we're going to use individual stories of people, like their actual story. Like the first question you asked me, we're going to we've been using that as through right now, we don't have a lot of money because of the pandemic. So we're not doing a big marketing campaign, but for the foreseeable future, we're going to use Power Within as our campaign to get new people into the sport, to make it more accessible, to show people that anyone, like my mom, anyone can do a triathlon. If you can, I would say if you can swim across a pool and ride a bike and walk, you can do a triathlon. And so I think that we have to accept the many layers in our sport. And what you were saying earlier about experiencing your community, I think that's also a real benefit right now, is that people were out like enjoying the outdoors for the first time for many people in a long time, or seeing their community differently. Even really athletic people started, again, that's my alone time too, outside of my coffee in the morning, is my workout. But what made our sport so special years ago was it was about these experiences, and about these experiences with this like tight-knit community. And that's what Power Within is really about. It's about taking those individual stories within our community and exposing them to everybody, because representation matters. And if you see somebody that looks like you or has your similar story, you go, I can do that too.
Yeah.
Like they're no different than me. So that's really what the focus of Power Within is about. And with Together We Thrive, it's our diversity, equity, inclusion, and access initiative. And so that's something that this didn't start with us with the killing of George Floyd. This started our diversity, equity, inclusion effort started many years ago, before I was even hired. It was one of the things that really attracted me to USA Triathlon, is they identified that we have a problem in our sport, a diversity problem.
Yeah.
And maybe not an inclusion problem, because like I said, I do believe people are welcomed in our sport with open arms. We do have those one-offs that aren't, but it's very rare. Right. And so we started working really early on at trying to change the face of our sport for the future, to really match the demographics of America. For 3 years in a row, we've won the Diversity and Inclusion Award from the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee. There's an NGB selected every year. We've been the NGB selected for the last 3 years for our efforts, because we've been committed to it through historically Black college and university efforts that we started 3 years ago, to military para initiatives. If you think about, we're trying to create a sport that it matches, again, the demographics of America, but more important than even that is that we do the things now that make this so it's not about like changing a number today.
Right.
It's about like really the quality of how we're going to focus on our diversity of our sport. And to me, it's not only the right thing to do for so many reasons, it's also good for the sport. And unless our sport really represents America, what we'll find out is our sport won't ever become a mass. It will continue to be very small, because if you watch something or see something and no one like you is involved in that thing, you're not likely going to jump into it unless you have a community around you or people encouraging you to.
Correct.
So it actually can help our small businesses grow in our sport. It can help, bring our sport to a broader audience, to get more investment from corporate America into our sport. There's so many advantages outside of just doing the right thing. And our board of directors realized this years ago. And really what we decided at the time is it starts at the top. It starts like, if you don't have leadership that represents a diverse community, then that's where the decisions are made. The board especially had a real focus on that. And now we had a female president most recently. We have the first elite para athlete ever to serve as an NGB president. We have as many females as males, where that's not the case in our past at all, not even close. My team, an executive team at USA Triathlon, we never had a female executive, never in the history of our organization, not one. Not only one director, but never an executive. Wow. And so now we three of my 6 executive leadership team are females. So this is before it was like popular. A few years ago, we created a position, diversity inclusion manager, and her focus is just on making sure that she's waking up every day thinking about this. So for us, it's a long initiative. And Together We Thrive came up because last year's, as our country was really struggling with this in a big way, we decided that in Colorado Springs here, we're not a diverse community. We're not historically been a diverse staff. So we shouldn't be the ones dictating to everybody else what diversity and inclusion means and how to do it in our sport. So we out to our community, and over 200 people responded saying they want to help us and volunteer and get involved in DEI efforts. So we held focus groups with every one of them, and talked to them and learned from them and listened. And what we did is we took what we learned from them and we created this diversity, equity, inclusion, and access group that is leaders, from Gwen Jorgensen, a former Olympian, to Summer Rappaport, who's a future Olympian, or one to the best leaders in urban multi-sport in our country, to people who've worked and been on the board at track and field, who knows what that they've done in the past, to really so we're not the ones saying this is what you should do, because the people on the ground are the ones who know what to do. But our job is, so Together We Thrive is about taking our principles around DEIA and spreading them in the country. And then also not us telling them what to do with those principles. It's us saying, hey, this really worked in Miami. They tried this initiative and it really worked. Hey, clubs around the country, you should consider this because it worked for them. And they can choose. It really, to us, is about local communities committing to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that commitment means that when they learn things or shared best practices, they feel like they have to take them on because it's so important. And that's what we're really hoping to do, is that the local communities activate in their communities what we share across the country. So to us, it's exciting because these are things that we've always believed in and done. And now there's a spotlight on it in a way, and it gives us a chance. And what I liked about my team last year is they didn't say, "Been doing this, we know what's right." They said, "We've been doing this, but we need to make sure what we're doing is right." And what we found out was some of it was really good and some of it was way off track. And we would never have learned that by just going out and saying this is what everyone should do. Instead, we had open ears and we shut our mouths and we really listened to everybody. And that I've learned more in the last year. And I come from a very diverse background too. So I think that set the tone and why I've been so passionate about it. My grandfather is Japanese. He fought for America in World War II in the 442nd, and wasn't allowed in restaurants and bars in the South. And his family was in internment camps in California while he was fighting for America. So he always taught me, look, you look white, your mom looks white. She goes, but he's like, but you do have this in you, and I want you to. And so I always carried that with me. And I grew up in an inner city, my high school was inner city. It was about 33% Black, Hispanic, white. So I just had a really good, and I went to college, and at the time was a mostly Caucasian, wealthy, it was at public school, but I was joined a fraternity. It was like culture shock for me. So I went from this integrated community to this very affluent, which I wasn't, community, and people were racist, and there was and I just wasn't, it was really a big shock for me. So that's when I really became passionate about it. I was like, whoa, I didn't actually think this existed at this level. I thought it was kind of like my parents or grandparents' problem. I saw that this is not something that is just going to go away with time. That actually intentional steps have to be taken. And so I see now my sister has 7, I think, adopted children, all of which are African American. And I see that what they go through too. So this isn't, and when I moved to the South, I saw it. When I moved to Houston, I saw different neighborhoods were segregated still. It was really, so that's why what I'm not trying to do is force everybody to believe what we believe, that diversity, equity, inclusion is important for America and for our sport, because that's not what I think is appropriate. What we can do is listen to our community, and they're telling us this is important.
Right.
And so much so, like Max Fennell, our first African-American pro, and we had last year, we did this really cool thing where we had fans vote, our people vote on the biggest moment in triathlon history, from Gwen's gold medal to us being going to the Olympic Games, it's Paralympic inclusion. Max ended up winning by a landslide, is the biggest moment in him being the first Black triathlete, professional triathlete. And that's just one of a million signs that our community really wants this and wants us to be a leader in this space. And what we're really focused on too is the younger generation. And what everything we know about this younger generation is they care more about social issues than my generation. They care more about impact, and they're going to walk away from you if you don't represent their values. They don't really see diversity the way we do. I'm saying this in broad brushes, but things is like, it's this group and that group. They see things more integrated already. In their mind, it's already integrated, and they don't know why we think the way we think and why we the way we talk. It's totally out of touch for them. It's just, they think of us as like totally out of touch with what's actually happening in their world. Right. And so we have to talk to them on their terms. If we don't, we'll lose them forever. And we can lose an entire generation from our sport if we're not talking to them and about what's important to them. Right. And people say that diversity, equity, inclusion has nothing to do with sport. It has everything to do with sport, because sport is a microcosm of society, and that people look at the sport and how you represent it. And I saw this when I worked in soccer. I saw it when I worked in the NFL. I saw it when I worked in college athletics. If you don't represent the community and what the community needs are, you're going to end up getting smaller and smaller, and pretty soon you're going to be irrelevant. Yeah. And so that's a big part of this. So it's not just about doing the right thing. It's about doing the right thing for the future of the sport.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. So many things. I wanted to say that in the middle of you explaining not only your personal connection and your personal experience with everything, is that it's our generation's responsibility. I feel that. I have 3 daughters, you have 3 daughters, and they look to me like, yeah, what's up with your generation? And I agree, because I can remember back in the 80s and 90s, and when my gym teacher would put on like an mock Olympic gym show, I didn't see differences. I grew up in such a small town, and it was predominantly white, Caucasian, but little by little, there was an integration, on a small scale, and I didn't see differences. Mm-hmm. I didn't. And it's probably one of the main reasons I'm the only one who moved south, and I stayed in Miami this long. And a lot of people ask me if I'm Cuban, or if I speak Spanish, and I don't, but I don't see differences. Mm-hmm. And so when I hear, especially from guests that I've had on the show or friends of mine, that what they're experiencing today from adults that are my age, it's very frustrating. And so to hear what you guys are doing is awesome. I applaud you and your team and everyone around that's giving more information so that it can continue to progress. And one of the things that I think is really important, and we'll go over to this, is all in the surge of coaches that are coming, right? Mm-hmm. So right now it's like there's online craziness. Everybody, you can become a wellness coach, this coach, that coach. And that's great. It's great. We want to continue to have that mindset of healthy coaches. You are an amazing leader in providing these online USAT coaching courses. So I want to get into that a little bit with you in asking you, what have you seen on your side of things? Has there been a huge surge in an increase in coaches coming on board?
Yeah, it's really been two different things. And one is that we did convert all of our learnings to online quickly, because we knew we couldn't do in-person certifications. And so what we found is that it attracted a lot of new people who hadn't considered being a coach, because it was more accessible to them. They didn't have to fly somewhere, spend a lot of money to stay in a hotel. So it really removed a barrier by bringing them online, a financial barrier for many people. And so that was one thing that we're really excited about. On the other end of the spectrum, because of the pandemic, many coaches went out of business. Yeah. And so it's really that's the sad side of this story, is that there's more opportunities for new people to come in because, again, we only have 2,300 certified coaches compared to 400,000 athletes. That's a pretty good ratio for any coach. And so what we're really trying to do is, we're better than ever, and this is a big focus of ours, is encouraging our members to hire a coach if they have the ability to at least start talking to the coaches in their community, to join a club, to get involved. And what we're seeing is that these certified coaches that really do well, and I guess this is a tip for the coaches here coming in about what is, get involved in your community. If you're not involved in your multi-sport community, you're going to be fighting an uphill battle, because if you're not close with your tri or bike store, if you're not tied in deeply at your club, here's the deal, is I would say that we've been really focused with our coaches on training them, or teaching them, that you don't train athletes for a race. If you train them for a race, the retention is going to go way down. You're not going to be able to keep them. They're training for one event and then they're gone forever. It's to train them for a lifestyle. And then the races are part of that lifestyle, like the exciting part, but it's not the end goal. And that's been what we've seen with coaches who've taken that on. They're the ones who are having the most success right now. And so what we've also heard from our coaches and other entrepreneurs, that's what most of them are in our sport, are entrepreneurs, is that they wanted us to help them with other things. Like, we created an entrepreneurship program in partnership with University of Colorado. So that we're offering to race directors, coaches, club directors on how to run a profitable business and help them run a good business and operate their business. We're also looking at what resources do coaches need? How can we help them? We have a Find a Coach kind of on our website to try to get people. We are going to go out of our way to promote that this year, like we never have in the past. And so what we're seeing with the coaching community, or people who are becoming coaches, they're already so passionate about our sport. We actually, right now, we have an L1, we have more females certified than males, and that's not something that's pretty standard. We're seeing more diverse individuals come through the ranks. So what we're seeing is, I think the future of our sport is really going to be the face of our sport in many ways will change when people in leadership roles, like I've talked about, so people who are coaches, club directors, race directors, again, match the demographics of America. Because if you see, and I've heard this from so many people, like a club leader who's, let's say, an African-American male, that sends a message, sends a message about the club. And so that what we've heard is that when there's a female leader, more females matriculate to that club, just naturally. Correct. And so what we want to try to do is help people become leaders in the sport from all backgrounds. And that, we believe, will also help, again, not just with our coaches being successful, but with the athletes, the representation of those leaders matching what we want our sport to look like in the future.
Awesome. I'll definitely put all the information in the notes of the show for those that are listening that are thinking about and considering. I know that one of my very good friends, Gabriel Yanni, and I were both we have logged in, we are on our way, and we are on our way to becoming coaches. Like it was just something that we both kept saying that we wanted to do. And then we both looked at each other and were like, all right, now's the time. Let's go for this. And I'm very excited about it. And to hear all of the resources that you have, I think it's really important for all those coaches of whatever level they are, whatever experience, and the business background is really important. Absolutely. Because otherwise, if you don't have that understanding and the support, then it can be very overwhelming. And one of the things that our coach has seen, and I've seen on Saturday mornings now here in Miami, is that he had about 40. January was like the beginning of our quote unquote season, I guess. It was like, okay, we're beginning the season, but did it end? Did it, like, it's the strangest time. And he had 40 new people that came out. And so that said a lot. And they were all different levels of beginners. And they were just so happy. They were just happy to be able to find a group that would go out on the beach and meet with specific distances, social distancing. And it was just great. It just felt awesome. So I'm really excited about the things to come and to see and learn with you as the guide there online. So that's awesome.
Let me just chime in there, because the one thing, a tip for coaches that are new, is find a mentor. It's really important. We have really experienced coaches who know what you're going to go through, and they can have you skip steps, avoid pitfall, like all the things, and we can match you with mentors. So if you don't have a coach, like, you're lucky. It sounds like you got a great coach in your backyard that can help you. but we can match you up with a coach that can help you. And that's really important as part of the process. The second thing you said about the 40 new athletes, I think the demand is going to be at an all-time high for our sport. But here's what we need from people in our sport. It's that the person who just bought that bike last year and got back out there, you need to invite them to that club meetup. You need to talk to them about joining you for a super sprint in your backyard, because that's really how we're going to see our communities change and see the sport grow. It's people now are open to this. What they need is a community to convince them that join me and I'll help you through your journey. So that's something I just encourage any listeners, is that every one of you can think of one or two people who picked up a bike, who started hiking, started jogging. Be their mentor, guide them to the sport, get them to their first finish line. And I promise you, they will always thank you for that and remember the fact that you got them to that finish line. And so that's something I've been really trying to encourage people, is we have this really great opportunity right now to attract people who never considered our sport until they were forced outdoors to go and wanted to enjoy the outdoors. And now they fell back in love with working a little bit, sweating a little bit, and enjoying the outdoors.
During the quarantine, one of the things that helped me, have been going through so much personally, and this podcast like helped so much to connect me with staying connected, but with a healthy distance, but was also the team checking in on each other. So I have to agree that whether it's a club or a small group or just a couple friends that, hey, you guys got bikes, it doesn't have to be so intense. It can be that you're going for bikes on the bike path and enjoying it, because if you're not enjoying it, chances are exactly it's not going to stick and stay around. But for me, I have found so many food truck places because of this whole situation. And my daughters and I have found places to eat from local farms that we can get to by bike. And that's really keeping that community and investment back into the community and local. We say like local coffee shops. Oh my gosh, if they were able to just open a window and give you something, you were so excited. So it is all of us interacting with one another and keeping each other going. That's so.
One thing you said, Caroline, is something that I've always believed, but is that you find out how important it is to support your community when times are tough. And I think when you saw on Main Street or whatever, that favorite restaurant or bike shop close this last year because of the pandemic, I think what that showed me and many other people around the country is how important it is to support local businesses. And that's also true in our sport. We created a campaign called Race Locally, Compete Nationally. And it's all about racing in your backyard, supporting those local race directors, again, joining a club, getting involved in your community, because they're the ones who suffered. I mean, they're the ones like, yeah, we struggled. We lost 40% of our revenue, and we had 30% less staff now than we did a year ago. But these are people, this is their livelihood. And they're doing this because they love it. These aren't people making millions of dollars. Right. So I would say that if you have an A race somewhere else, that's perfectly fine. Totally understand. That can be your compete nationally. I would really focus on making sure you do 2 or 3 local races. That's how our sport's going to come back, is supporting the local community. And that's something that I just believe. And like I said, I was embarrassed about my coffee because of the brand, because I do like local coffee shops. There's that personal touch that I just like a lot, and it just tastes better. And I think there's something like that about your community, experiencing your outdoors in your community and knowing that you're racing with people that live near you and that it's cool and that you're supporting a local race director. It's the same thing as supporting that local restaurant. So I would just encourage everyone, go out today, sign up for a local race. It's more than just racing when you're supporting your community. And that's what I think part of this is, us looking really inward at what we want to be as athletes after this. So some of it is about these great experience on an international or national level. Many of us, it's now maybe about having other people feel like we do and making sure we support our community and bringing it back. Because I guarantee in some of these smaller communities that only have 1 or 2 races, if you don't race, they're going away. Yeah. This is not like an if thing. And so go out and support them. The only way that they live is off us registering and competing in their races. Mm-hmm. And so that, to me, this is just so important, and a message I want to make sure it gets out to everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. I think so many appreciate that. It's great advice. We are at the point where we are going to hit the rapid fire round. Are you ready for the Get a sip of your coffee here. Let's get some coffee.
Okay, I've already pounded mine. I have a sip left.
All right. I'll try to go easy. But my coach did have a little help. Uh-oh, exactly, right? No, they're good. They're good. All right. So here we go. Rapid fire round. Number 1, swimming, bilateral or breathe to one side. Which one do
Oh
you
my
prefer?
gosh. Yeah. So it has to be fast or else I'd explain this. So one side.
One side. We can go back. We can go back later and you can give a little more. So one side. Is it left or right side? Which side?
Right. Yeah, I'll tell you, I had an injury. That's why. But yeah.
Ah, okay. All right. We'll definitely come back to that. Okay. And 2, for training long rides, bibs or tri.
Shorts.
Oh, interesting. Okay. 3, road.
So I was a wrestler, so I stay away from bibs now. I go right short.
See, there's a story behind every single one. It's so true. All right. All right. Number 3, because of one of the interviews that I did listen to, I was interested in hearing this. Road cycling or gravel? Which is your favorite right now?
Yeah, so always do road, and this year it's turned to gravel. But if I'm in a race, I want to race on a road bike.
Yeah.
I love road bikes. Even in triathlons, I didn't start using a tri bike until 3 years ago. Much faster, by the way. So do that only on don't do it in Colorado, where there's lots of mountains. But yeah, I gained like probably 2 miles per hour when I switched to a tri bike. But I just love the feel and the grip and everything of the road bike. But I think just getting out like you did and enjoying the trails this year made me fall in love with that too.
Yeah, gravel's fun. All right. 4, how do you take your eggs? Scrambled, over easy, or sunny side up?
Over medium, I used to.
Over medium. Okay,
Yeah.
over medium. There you
I don't want
go.
to get too drippy, I don't want it to be too soggy.
Right in the middle. Right in the
Depends
middle.
on
Right in the medium.
So like if it's kilos, I like over easy because I like it to drip all over. So it just depends on the meal too.
Depends on everything that's going on the plate. I agree with that. I agree. All right. And number 5, sunrises or sunsets?
Sunrise every day, always. Yeah.
Awesome.
And part of this is my mentality is I like to look forward to things and see like kind of embrace what's ahead. And I see that analogous with the sunrise versus the sunsets, like the close and ending of things.
Yeah.
I like the beginning of things more than I like the ending.
I have to agree with you on that as well. I love a sunrise, but I have to say sunsets have been happening a lot more lately than the sunrises. So I got to work on that. I'm going to give you a bonus round question and then you can go back to the swimming, breathing. But the bonus question is, because you're in the Rockies there, cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, or this new sport that's on the rise, skimo. I don't know if you've heard of it, but cross-country, downhill, or ski.
So I grew up downhill skiing and love it. Now I'm switching to cross-country, actually, Nordic skiing. My high-performance general manager was an Olympian in Nordic skiing, and he's 50, but he looks 30. And I attribute a lot of that to being an endurance athlete. Here, I think for me, I'll still always do alpine or downhill skiing because my kid, it's what I do with my family.
Yeah.
But I really think that I'm going to long-term enjoy cross-country skiing more because it'll give me a workout that I love sweating and getting that workout, but it's still technical and you have to really learn it and there's a lot of skill to it.
Yeah, awesome. Awesome.
But
Well,
I like the
thank you.
speed of downhill. I just love that.
I
I
know.
used to ride a motorcycle. I like roadside bikes because of the speed.
Mhm.
So yeah, I'm a speed junkie.
You want that reward. You want that reward
do.
part of it.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit quickly before we go here. You're swimming. You said that you swim and you breathe to the right side. So you said you had an injury?
Yeah, so I grew up swimming. My dad was a great swimmer, so I knew how to swim and I swam the right way. And then in 2014, I was training for Ironman Arizona, and I worked at Arizona State University at the time, and it was like a month before the race. It was my peak kind of load week. So I did a 85-mile bike ride and a 15-mile run that Saturday, and I had to go to a football game that night. Long day, right? Long day. Went to the football game that night. The next morning I couldn't sleep because just from the activity and like everything. So I woke up, I'm like, let me get a little like shakeout ride in just to feel good. I'll do 20 miles or something like that. So I'm riding around and I'm just not totally crisp because I don't need a lot of sleep, but I just wasn't feeling crisp. And I was going downhill and my water bottle flipped out or came out of the back, and I went back to go grab it because it was going loose, and my bike flipped going like 25 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh.
I went over my bars and had a grade 5 clavicle separation on my left shoulder and other things that happened, but that was the main injury that like really impacted me.
Oh, wow.
So when I started coming back, and it took me, obviously I ended up not having to get a surgery, and actually we talked about wrestling quickly earlier, is the reason why is when we had a great orthopedic surgeon at Arizona State University. He's the head of director of medicine for the Mayo Clinic. And he said, look, Rocky, most people get surgery. He goes, but you have to understand that That means we're going to put screws in you, and that if you get another crash, you're donezo. There's no more triathlon for you. He said, but what we see a lot of times that, with hockey, wrestling, cyclists, and others who get it, there are certain athletes that are actually built to do physical therapy and recover naturally by taping it down and like working at it. And he said, and you have a build that does it, where I'm almost like a tucked in cyclist, like this, like my traps and everything are bigger than my shoulders. And wrestlers are like that. And some hockey players are like that. And he said, and he said, you're built like that, like almost perfectly to recover from this. So he's like, it's going to take a lot of work. So he taped it down. But anyways, one of the outcomes of that, and I can lift my arm up, everything's fine. But I'm not symmetrical in my swimming. So like when I'm swimming, I can't, when my arm's up and me putting my head, like the way that it doesn't quite, like I lose balance. So I went from swimming like comfortably to now I can do it. When I found I was good at swimming, it was when I had that flow in the water. And so what I found is that if I breathe to my left, I'm thrown off of that, and the balance goes off. So I had to learn how to swim. I had to relearn how to swim on one side. So it's not, it was intentional, but it wasn't because like I couldn't do it. It was because it wasn't working for me anymore. And that was probably the only real negative long-term thing that I've had. I have neck pains occasionally, but it healed up and I started doing triathlons.
Isn't that incredible? That's incredible. I'm sorry to hear about the bilaterals.
My wife has to see me with a shirt off occasionally, and I have a big bum here. But other than
it's okay. No, but those are battle wounds there. So that's always good to have those.
I was really scared for my little girls though. My two oldest were little at the time, and my wife had to pick me up from the accident. I couldn't even. Somebody found me because I was on the ground. I lost consciousness. And they used my cell phone, and I somehow she was my favorite, so they called and she picked me up, and so they saw me like.
Oh my God!
My oldest especially reminded me. I don't know, a couple of years ago. She's like, "Remember when you got beaten up and we brought you to the hospital?" She remembers it as like me getting beaten up.
Yep, with the pavement. Yep.
Exactly. I lost a fight with the pavement.
It's something that, especially riding here in Miami, like I can't express. I have helmet here, and my girls are, they're 15 and 14 and 9. And every time like helmet, and they're like, yeah, I know, Mom, but no helmet.
That pain too. I find it funny because I never rode with a helmet growing up. And now I went skiing for the first time, like when my kids got old enough after 10 years, and everyone's wearing helmets. And now that I'm doing it, I'm like, I would never go out without a helmet on on a bike ever. But when I was a kid, it was just normal. And now I'm like, well, even rollerblades, I'm like, don't go outside without the helmet on. And they're like, give it a break, Dad. But I just remember as a kid, we didn't have that, right? I was a skater, I was a BMXer. I don't ever remember having a helmet.
We didn't. Yeah. In fact, I remember the first time that I went skiing recently, it was like maybe a couple years back, going up and visiting, and it had been years since I had been skiing, and they were like, yeah, helmets. And I'm like, helmet? Okay. It was cool because for living in Florida, my blood is thinned, and I was like, okay, keep the head warm.
Yep.
But it is definitely a different feeling. And
sense though, like you're flying downhill at 50 miles an hour with trees all around you. We should probably be wearing helmets. But when I had to put it on the first time, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like this is over the top. And then I was skiing. I'm like, I'm not as good of a skier as I was when I was younger. So I'm like, oh my God, I need this thing.
It's like how we used to drive around with our parents, and they'd put the arm out, like, here, I'm gonna protect you.
I rode in the back of my dad's truck. I literally did. That's where I drove. I sat in the back of my dad's truck everywhere. Right? And it was just normal. Right now, I think we'd get arrested if I had.
Yes, probably. We would. Rocky, this has been such an awesome way to start the day, and I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait to put everything down in the notes for everybody to get more information about USA Triathlon, for those that are individuals who are thinking about going into the sport, or for those that are coaches and they need more resources and more information. Thank you. I appreciate your time today, and I hope you have a great rest of the week.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much. Thanks for all you're doing too.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of the Why We Try podcast. It is a complete honor to be able to bring you these amazing guests and all this information to your ears. Please leave me a review at the end of this in Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you listen to your podcast. Also, you can reach me on Instagram at Why We Try Podcast. Send me some information if you think you should be on the show, or somebody who has inspired you, send me an email at caroline@whywetrypodcast.com. I do read every single one of your emails, and I do read every single one of your reviews. You can also send me a message on Instagram, and I would be happy to hear what you have to say about this show, any questions that you have or comments that you have. I'm here for you guys. Don't forget to bring your favorite beverage wherever you go and tune into the Why We Try podcast. Have a great one.